Black Cat by Edgar Allen Poe. Tomorrow I die, and today I would unburden my soul. My immediate purpose is to place before the world a series of mere household events which together have terrified, tortured, destroyed me. From my infancy I was noted for the docility and humanity of my disposition. I was especially fond of animals and was indulged by my parents with a great variety of pets. I married early and was happy to share with my wife a fondness of pets. She lost no opportunity of procuring those of the most agreeable kind. We had birds, goldfish, a fine dog, rabbits, a small monkey, and a cat. The latter was a remarkably large and beautiful animal, entirely black. We called him Pluto, and he was my favourite pet and playmate. I alone fed him, and he attended me wherever I went about the house. Our friendship lasted in this manner for several years, during which my general temperament and character experienced a radical alcohol-fueled alteration for the worse. I grew day by day more moody, more irritable, more regardless of the feelings of others. I started to use intemperate language to my wife and even offered her personal violence. My pets were similarly treated. I not only neglected but ill-used them. At length, even Pluto began to experience the effects of my ill temper. One night, returning home much intoxicated, I fancied that the cat avoided my presence. I seized him, and in his fright at my violence, he inflicted a slight wound on my hand with his teeth. This infuriated me greatly, so I took from my waistcoat pocket a penknife, opened it, grasped the poor beast by the throat, and deliberately cut one of his eyes from the socket. I blush, I burn, I shudder, while I pen the damned atrocity. When reason returned with the morning, I experienced a sentiment, half of horror, half of remorse for the crime which I had been guilty. I again plunged into excess, and soon drowned in wine the memory of the deed. In the meantime, the cat slowly recovered. He went about the house as usual, but as might be expected, fled in extreme terror at my approach. At first I was grieved by this evident dislike on the part of a creature which had once so loved me. But this feeling soon gave place to irritation and ultimately to perverseness. One morning, in cold blood, I slipped a noose about his neck and hung it to the limb of the tree. On the night of the day on which this cruel deed was done, I was aroused from sleep by the cry of fire. The curtains of my bed were in flames. The whole house was blazing. It was with great difficulty that my wife, a servant, and myself managed to escape the burning house. On the day succeeding the fire, I visited the ruins. The walls, with one exception, had fallen in. About this one, still standing, a dense crowd were collected. I approached and saw, as if graven in bas relief, Upon the white surface, the figure of a gigantic cat. There was a rope about the animal's neck. For months I could not rid myself of the phantasm of the cat, and gradually started to feel remorse. I even went so far as to regret the loss of the animal. I decided to look about me for another cat of a somewhat similar appearance with which to supply its place. One night, as I sat half stupefied in a den of more than infamy, my attention was suddenly drawn to some black object, which turned out to be a black cat, fully as large as Pluto and close resembling him in every respect but one. Pluto had not a white hair upon him, but this cat had a large, although indefinite, splotch of white, covering nearly the whole region of his breast. Upon my touching him, he immediately arose, purred loudly, rubbed against my hand, and appeared delighted with my notice. This, then, was the very creature of which I was in search. I continued my caresses, and when I prepared to go home, it accompanied me. When it reached the house, it domesticated itself at once and became immediately a great favourite with my wife. For my own part, I soon started to dislike it. This was just the reverse of what I had anticipated, but its evident fondness for myself rather disgusted and annoyed me, eventually turning into feelings of hatred and unutterable loathing. What added to my hatred of the beast was the discovery that, like Pluto, it was also missing one of its eyes. The more I loathed the cat, the more it seemed to like me. It followed me everywhere, and whenever I sat, it would crouch beneath my chair or spring upon my knees, covering me with its loathsome caresses. If I arose to walk, it would get between my feet and thus nearly throw me down. At such times, although I longed to destroy it with a blow, I was yet withheld from doing so by absolute dread of the beast. This dread had been heightened by the fact that the rather indefinite white mark on the cat had gradually assumed a distinct outline. It was now the image of a hideous, of a ghastly thing, of the gallows. Alas, I started to suffer from dreams of unutterable fear. Because of these torments, the feeble remnant of the good within me succumbed. The moodiness of my usual temper increased to hatred of all things, and of all mankind, including my uncomplaining wife. One day she accompanied me upon some household errand into the cellar of our building. The cat followed me down the steep stairs and, nearly throwing me headlong, exasperated me to madness. Uplifting an axe and forgetting my childish dread, I aimed a blow at the animal. But this blow was arrested by the hand of my wife. Goaded by the interference, into a rage more than demoniacal, I withdrew my arm from her grasp and bedded the axe in her brain. She fell dead upon the spot without a groan. The hideous murder accomplished, I set myself forthwith to the task of concealing her body. Finally, I determined to wall it up in the cellar. For a purpose such as this, the cellar was well adapted. Its walls were loosely constructed and had lately been plastered throughout with a rough plaster. which the dampness of the atmosphere prevented from hardening. Moreover, in one of the walls was a projection caused by a false chimney that had been filled up and made to resemble the rest of the cellar. I made no doubt that I could readily displace the bricks at this point, insert the corpse, and wall the whole thing up as before, so that no eye could detect anything suspicious. I set about this task. When I had finished, I felt satisfied that all was right. The wall did not present the slightest appearance of having been disturbed. The rubbish on the floor I picked up with the minutest care. My next step was to look for the beast which had been the cause of so much wretchedness, but it did not show itself. The second and third day passed, and still my tormentor came not. Once again I breathed as a free man. The monster in terror had fled the premises forever. My happiness was supreme. The guilt of my dark deed disturbed me but little. Some few inquiries had been made, but these had been readily answered. Even a search had been instituted, but of course nothing was to be discovered. Upon the fourth day of the assassination, a party of the police came very unexpectedly into the house and proceeded again to make rigorous investigation of the premises. They left no nook or corner unexplored. At length, the police were thoroughly satisfied and prepared to depart. "Gentlemen," I said at last, as the party ascended the steps, "I delight to have allayed your suspicions. This, by the way, is a very well-constructed house. These walls are solidly put together. And here, through the mere frenzy of bravado, I rapped heavily with the cane which I held in my hand upon that very portion of the brickwork behind which stood the corpse of my wife. No sooner had the reverberation of my blows sunk into silence, or that emerged a cry, at first muffled and broken, but quickly swelling into one loud, continuous, and inhuman scream. For one instant the party upon the stairs remained motionless. In the next, a dozen stout arms were toiling at the wall. It fell bodily. The corpse, already greatly decayed and clotted with gore, stood erect before the eyes of the spectators. Upon its head, the red extended mouth and solitary eye of fire sat the hideous beast. I had walled the monster up within the tomb.